It's like she's, like most women here go to see the hairdressers every week or something. She goes to warfare every week, and it's all recorded there. And not only did she win at all her battles, right? She was also a high priestess for the Shang dynasty. She actually went to consult the gods on behalf of the emperor or the king, whatever you call him, and she did a really good job. When she died, the king continued consulting her. She was made a saint. And this is all recorded. When they found her tomb, so many wonderful things were found in there. All the things that women like to have, like hair combs and all that stuff, and hairpin, whatever. But on top of that, they found the things that confirm her status. All the ceremonial stuff that you use as a high priestess to go and consult the gods. All her weapons. She had lots of weapons there. Her chariots, her horses were buried with her. And lots of ivory and all kinds of beautiful precious metals and precious stones with inscriptions, people honoring her, memorizing her great battles. So she was truly a very unique, very distinguished person, right, in her time. This is Lady Fu Hao's tomb in 1976. And it also confirms that what most of the world's prejudice against China is wrong. Most people think that China never had elephants. China always had elephants. China might not have elephants today, but it always had elephants. She had led armies before where elephants were involved in battle. So, but on top of that, there was enough ivory around her to suggest that she probably had so many elephants around her. But she also loved dogs. In those days, unlike well, there is some parallel here. Today, I suppose if you have a nice big house and you want to be safe, you keep a good guard dog. You know, if you have a Rottweiler or Doberman or German Shepherd, your house is safe. You can sleep well, and you know that anybody comes in will sort of lose a chunk of their bum or something if they came in and face your Rottweiler or German Shepherd or Doberman. But in those days, they had war dogs, and the war dogs were massive. They were 100+ kilos or more. They wore armor. They fought like wild animals, and they protected your home, but they also were used for war. And in her case, she kept her dogs with her. When she died, the dogs were buried with her. So, you know, she obviously loved dogs. So any lady that loves dogs, she deserves her success, you know. Sorry. What I'm trying to tell you is she was an incredible lady. And her tomb gave so much insight into what life was in Shang Dynasty. Okay. Shang Dynasty in that time also was very well versed in mathematics. They had records of huge calculations, large numbers, division, multiplication. So they were not as sort of savage as we thought they were. It may not have permeated throughout society, but they certainly have a lot of wise people down there, so technologically advanced people. Their calendar was a 366-day-year calendar, going back 4,000 years ago. That's pretty bright, right? And the calendar was so good, it was used for a number of purposes. From the king's point of view, it was used to collect taxes. So there were set dates, you got to pay your taxes. That's really important because society will fall apart without taxes. But they also had dates for the cultivation of crops. They had the dates when you can go and harvest crops. They give you very, very clear dates. And on top of that, they also had dates which had astrological significance. For example, they remembered that, you know, such and such a king was born such and such a date, and the star suggests if you want to have a next king, he should be born around such and such a time. You know, this is when we had a great victory. This is the time of the year we should go and do battle. We have got a great victory. All chronicled in the calendar. So they are, you know, pretty cluey, pretty smart people. You know, they learn from their past and build on it, right? So it was a society that was far advanced of its times. Their logistics were very good. Why did they win so many wars? This is another thing I have to share with you. Again, every 100 articles that I read about Chinese warfare, 90+ of them are so far off the mark, I don't know where to begin. There's some, either the people out there don't like military warfare, and because they are historians, they have to handle it because it's just one of the core options. They say, or people didn't do their homework, or they don't like Chinese people because it's so far off the mark. One of the things that is widely assumed throughout the world, even to today, is that Chinese people and horses don't get along. China didn't know how to ride horses. That's why the Manchurians beat us. That's why the Mongolians beat us. That's why every pygmy, everybody beat the Chinese, because the Chinese can't handle horses. Not true. Not true. Because during the Shang dynasty, they were surrounded by tribes that were really good with horses. All their neighbors 真係好擅長用馬嘅，你知冇？ So during the Shang dynasty, they actually had a strong cavalry. Cavalry means 騎馬嗰啲兵. They had a strong cavalry. They had to. The other guys were cavalry. If you didn't have a cavalry, you get wiped out. Can you imagine your foot soldier standing down there and the guy is a cavalry, he comes in and swipe at you, you're finished. Because cavalry with the horse, first of all, the horse will flatten you. Secondly, the horse carries the momentum of the weapon. Your history, they had a very powerful cavalry. But on top of that, they had first-rate chariots. The best chariots in the world were in China. And I read all these books that keep telling me, oh, the Chinese actually borrowed from, I won't mention names, borrowed from there, stole from there, picked up one from there. No, no, no. The Chinese had their own chariots and they were the best chariots. Please get your historical facts right. The Chinese chariots compared to the other chariots so much more advanced. The spokes of the wheel, the way the wheel turned, the metal and the wood casing, the leather casing was completely different. And the chariots that they used went to a level of sophistication where they had specifically trained archers, specifically trained lancemen, specifically trained rider, and this began at a very young age. In fact, all the nobility and all the people who were in the warrior class had to train to use chariots. You either, sort of control the horses, or you were the bowman, or you were the lance. And, this went right all the way down to the Zhao dynasty, all the way through the, spring and autumn period and the warring period. They were still using chariots and using it really well when the terrain allowed you. I mean, chariot wasn't allowed. I mean, if you're going to climb uphill with a chariot, it didn't work. But, if you're in flat terrain, chariots were unstoppable. So this notion, let's put it aside once and for all, that Chinese don't know how to ride horses and Chinese never had a cavalry. No, it's not true. Huh? Okay, they're a very powerful chariot army. So anyway, aside from that, other parts of logistics that people weren't aware of. The Shang dynasty actually used the water system really well. There are a lot of rivers in China, big, small, lakes and stuff, and they used them for transportation, for logistics. When equipment was too heavy, when there were too many troops, when they had to carry lots of rice or millet or whatever the case might be, or dry provisions, or hay for the horses, they put them on boats and they used the river system. The logistics was very good. Again, seemed to bypass a lot of people. I suspect most historians don't like military warfare, so when it comes to military history, I'm sure there are some good people out there, but they would be pretty rare. Most of the stuff I read is almost unreadable. It's like, I don't really want to write about this. I don't really want to research about this. Can I cut it down to, one paragraph? So military history and martial art history, not very well documented, unfortunately, because I think it shows a bias on the part of the people who wrote, because they were more interested in poetry and the music, which is fine, but the balance is out. Because if you want to understand Shang dynasty, you must understand what made Shang dynasty succeed. What was the power structure of the Shang dynasty? Because at the end of the day, society can be analyzed in its terms of the power structure. Where did the power lay? And in Shang dynasty, power arose from the tip of my pointed spear. And regal power was how firmly I can grip that very precious, almost magical sword. That was power. And you understand that most people who wrote on Shang dynasty just kind of either skim through or miss the main point of what the Shang dynasty was about. Okay, so we have this very powerful dynasty. Weaponry, Sifu Chinese Kung Fu Grandmaster must talk about weaponry. Shang dynasty had some really, really impressive weapons. You can see that they were the first to use bronze weapons and also stone weapons, but they also had other metallic weapons which unfortunately they didn't do it en masse. It could be because the kings thought it's not a good idea for a second person to have such a sharp sword, so I'll let the metallurgist just do it for me only. But they had a lot of really, really top class, very sharp. Some of the weapons not fully understood, even the metallurgy. So the concept of bo kim, bo dou, whatever, it's true. They did have it. It's just that like I said, for preservation purposes, if you belong to a certain clan and your clan was beating everybody else because your weapons were sharper and harder and faster, obviously you're not going to share it around. You're not going to mass manufacture it. You just keep it to yourself, right? But the metallurgy was very, very good, first rate. Okay, what weapons did they use? They were so effective. For those of you who are going to learn martial arts from me, good to know a little bit. The most basic was, of course, the Tou Kim. Tou and Kim, the broadsword, the Chinese, saber. Now, Kim wasn't very popular because it was mainly for the royalty, and it was usually associated with religious purposes, ceremonial purposes, and for the king to keep for his self-defense in case his wife gets upset at him for coming home late or something. Sorry. Um, the broadsword was the weapon of choice. The Tanto in the field soldiers, very good, very effective, strong. Then there was the Cheong or the Miu or Mao. The Cheong is the spear with a typical diamond-shaped head. The Miu or Mao is like a Chris, like a snake, And they had this, and they were also very effective. Then they had bow and arrows. Now the bow and arrows, the construction, very, very good. I'm not an engineer, but apparently the Shang Dynasty had already developed the mechanism for the bow was very, very good, very, very well made, and the angle of the bow and the string, very good material, very powerful, great reach, great accuracy, so great killing power in the in the battlefield. Then they have something called the kick. And kick is it's like a long pole with a spear head, and then plus a kind of like a double-edged blade that extends both ways, so it forms a cross. Now the kick, they experimented so hard on it to change the angle. They found that I think 130 degrees was the perfect angle. They experimented it, and even on the blade itself, how to shape the angle of the blade. They kept working on it so that when the opposing cavalry came along or chariots came along, these guys surrounded the horses and took the horses down with that. And that, of course, evolved into a super weapon, but Loipo down a Three Kingdoms period. He has Fong Tin Kick, which is much grander, but the original prototype was there and very, very effective. And then they have several other sort of really peculiar weapons which no longer exist today in in the public, but existed as far down to the Song Dynasty. And these two weapons I should mention to you. I'm trained in one of them, and not the other. The other, you have to be I think basically about 9'6" and sort of weigh about 300 kilos to use it. Now there are two weapons. I'll mention the bigger one first. The bigger one, which I say you basically have to be about 9'6" and 300 kilos to use it, is called the Comet Mallet or Comet Hammer. Chinese call it Lao Sing Choi. Basically, it's the handle is probably this big. You've got to be a really big guy, and at the end of it, it used to be a big rock. Then of course rocks were sort of like not so easy to shape to the handle, so they made it out of metal later. It's a big, it looks like a big lollipop. Okay, the smaller version is probably 50 pounds each. The larger versions probably go to 100 kilos each. And these guys were the senior generals. They sat on horseback and they tied it to the side of the horse. And when the opponent comes and both of you engage in your long weapons, and the guy's spear falls off or something, you get close. Yeah. If the guy misses, the horse has a bad day because the horse head goes off. It really is before a fight, opponent looks like this. After fight, it looks like a big piece of hamburger meat, just completely flat. This is a huge weapon. Have you seen that before? I don't know if you have. And then the other weapon that they have is called the Long Ah Pang, which I have been taught to use. The Long Ah Pang is also a very frightening weapon. It's probably began as a caveman club made of stone. Really effective. Whack somebody in the head, end of fight. Body anywhere, probably end of fight. But then they found out that maybe this sort of stone club, when it's got rough edges, it really does more damage. So they thought, why don't we make rough edges? So they actually created this metallic club that looks like a baseball bat but much larger, and then they had fangs attached to it. So wolf fangs they call them, and they're also very deadly. In fact, history records that some of the greatest warriors in history actually fell to these two weapons. So they are pretty scary weapons. Huh?